Before we begin, a quick note. This video is not a critique, nor a label. We're talking about archetypes, symbolic images that live in our unconscious across all cultures since forever. Every woman, just like every man, carries these patterns within. And the archetype of the eternal girl is one of the most powerful and also the most challenging. What you're about to see is a symbolic mirror, one that might reveal more than you expect. Why do certain women never grow up? Why, even as adults, do they remain trapped in a world where everything is light, but nothing is deep? There's a secret that crosses generations, and almost no one talks about it. An invisible pattern that shapes choices, destroys relationships, and imprisons the soul. Have you ever wondered why you keep repeating the same cycles? Today you might discover it's not lack of strength. What are archetypes and why they matter? There's something inside us that wasn't taught, and yet we recognize it. It's as if certain images, ideas, or stories pass through us without asking permission. Jung called this archetypes, deep structures of the psyche, present in all human beings, in all eras. They show up in fairy tales, movies, dreams, and even in decisions we make without knowing why. An example, think of the figure of the mother, the hero, or the charming girl. They all live within us, even if we've never heard of mythology or analytical psychology. But an archetype isn't just an image, it's an energy field, a way of feeling and reacting to the world. Imagine a woman who always seems to be floating, light, fun, impossible not to notice. Behind this charm, an unconscious pattern might be operating, that of the Puella Aeterna. It's not about age, nor about being childish. It's about an internal posture that resists maturation, even when life calls for roots. And the most curious thing? This pattern isn't conscious. It acts behind the scenes, directing choices, sabotaging processes, maintaining illusions. The most dangerous thing about archetypes is that they act even when we don't notice. And that's why recognizing what lives inside us is so urgent. The Puella, for example, might be present in that woman who keeps changing cities, jobs, partners, always seeking the next perfect beginning. It seems like freedom, but it might be escape. And then you understand, archetypes matter because they shape destinies. They're writing stories. And maybe yours is one of them. But before identifying the Puella, we need to look more closely at who she really is. Who is the Puella Aeterna? She walks into a room and everything changes. There's something magical in the way she smiles, as if the world were still an amusement park waiting to be explored. This is the Puella Aeterna, the eternal girl. It doesn't matter if she's 20 or 50 years old, her essence vibrates with a youth that seems untouched by time. She enchants because she brings freshness, creativity, lightness. But behind the brightness, there's something not immediately visible, a veiled refusal of adult life's weight, of the constant effort that sustains what is true. The Puella lives in the territory of spontaneity, but deeply fears the binds of daily life. She can't stand decisions that require continuous responsibility, nor bonds that ask for roots. She desires freedom, as if it were oxygen, but often confuses freedom with absence of commitment. You know that friend who starts incredible projects but never finishes them? Or that woman who falls in love easily but can't sustain a relationship when the enchantment passes? It's the Puella energy acting, not out of malice, but from an unconscious attempt to avoid the pain of growth. And here's the most delicate point. The Puella isn't just light. Along with her enchanting brightness, she carries a shadow made of insecurity, instability, and illusion. It's like living in an eternal movie of first dates, never reaching the part where you build something real. This archetype can be a source of innovation, beauty, creative power, but if not seen clearly, it becomes a repetitive script that robs the soul of depth. And it's precisely in this dynamic between beginning and continuity that the next dilemma reveals itself. The seduction of the eternal beginning. There's something addictive about the smell of the new. The first day of school, the beginning of a romance, the excitement of a brilliant idea at midnight. The Puella lives off this. For her, the beginning is where magic lives, and everything that comes after seems to weaken the enchantment. She feeds on expectation, on that little chill in the stomach that accompanies the unknown. But when time starts demanding consistency, she withdraws. The project loses its charm. The relationship cools off. Routine becomes prison, and suddenly she disappears, physically or emotionally. This escape from the after is subtle but constant. Often she doesn't even notice the pattern. She goes around saying she lost interest, that it wasn't quite right, or that the energy changed. Actually, what changed was the stage of the cycle, and she unconsciously only knows how to inhabit the enthusiasm of the beginning. A classic example is the woman who keeps changing careers, always full of new ideas, but never deepens into any of them. Or the one who's taken 5 self-knowledge courses but can't apply anything consistently. The problem isn't lack of talent, it's resistance to maturation. The danger of this pattern is that it gives the illusion of movement when actually everything goes in circles. It's like planting 1,000 seeds and abandoning the field before harvest. Life seems full of possibilities, but lacking in results. The mind dreams big, but the heart lives frustrated. Because there's a difference between freedom and dispersion, between lightness and superficiality. And this difference becomes even clearer when we look at the emotional root of this dynamic, which is usually closer to the maternal figure than we imagine. The mother who was never integrated. Behind the Puella's enchanting lightness, there's almost always a hidden, unnamed absence, that of the non-integrated mother. And this mother could have been overprotective, distant, or even symbolic, but she left deep marks. The eternally girlish woman often hasn't cut the invisible cord that connects her to the inner mother. This doesn't mean she lives with her mom at 30, but that emotionally she still seeks a lap that will save her from the world. Independence scares her. Confrontation feels like rejection. Autonomy hurts like abandonment. It's a silent wound, hard to identify, because it's camouflaged under the desire to be cared for, protected, understood. The Puella wants a partner, but is actually looking for a symbolic father. She wants freedom, but fears the loneliness that accompanies mature choices. And the most curious thing? Often, this relationship with the maternal figure isn't even conscious. It might surface, for example, in disproportionate reactions to criticism, in extreme sensitivity to judgment, or in the constant need for external approval. She wants to fly but hasn't learned to cut her own symbolic wings yet, those made of childhood expectations and pain. The process of psychological growth requires a break, not physical, but internal. A symbolic cut with this maternal figure that still dictates invisible steps. But this cut is scary. After all, who are you without the need to be protected? Who do you become when you no longer have someone to blame for your choices? The answer doesn't come easy, but it starts to emerge, often when relationships repeat patterns of frustration, enchantment, and escape. Relationships between enchantment and frustration. She arrives as if she doesn't want anything, and changes everything. The vibrant look, the light speech, the presence that seems magical. The Puella enchants easily, and it's not theater. It's genuine. She really believes in love, in connection, in the possibility of something extraordinary. The problem is what comes after, because when the relationship demands depth, she gets lost. What was light becomes heavy. The bond starts to suffocate, and she feels like she's disappearing inside what should strengthen her. The other person usually takes time to understand what's happening. First, they fall for the brightness, the freedom, the intensity. But soon they realize that behind the spontaneity, there's a resistance to committing to what's real. The Puella doesn't want to lose her individuality, and that's legitimate. But instead of dialoguing with the challenge, she usually escapes, physically or emotionally. The most subtle examples are in the silences, in the withdrawals, in the repeated excuses that she needs some time, or in relationships that begin and end as easily as we change playlists. And when confronted, she usually reacts with victimization or escape. It's not out of malice. It's that confrontation hurts because it activates the unresolved wound from childhood, not feeling accepted when she doesn't please. The Puella wants to be loved like a fairy tale princess, but life together is made of conflicts, limits, and imperfections, and accepting this requires a maturity she doesn't yet know how to access. But an inevitable question starts to emerge. What if the outside world is reinforcing this pattern instead of helping overcome it? The society that rewards superficiality. We live in a time where seeming matters more than being. A culture that idolizes youth, aesthetics, and lightness as if they were synonyms for success. The Puella Aeterna fits perfectly into this scenario. After all, she's the embodiment of eternal novelty, enchanting freedom, the light spirit everyone wants around, but few can actually sustain. Society applauds the woman who never ages, who doesn't weigh anything down, who doesn't demand. But in the mirror's silence, emptiness appears, and the archetype, reinforced by likes and filters, crystallizes as a golden prison. The problem is that this prison has invisible bars. It doesn't just prevent growth, it sabotages the soul. When everything needs to be Instagrammable, pain needs to be hidden, tiredness disguised, loneliness denied. And the eternal girl archetype, which could be a channel for creativity and renewal, becomes a mechanism for escaping reality. And the cruelest part, this demand doesn't just come from outside. Many women start demanding of themselves to always be light, young, desirable. Authenticity starts becoming a burden, depth a flaw, and maturation an enemy to be avoided. But the true feminine is much more than a social ideal. It's made of cycles, losses, reinvention. It carries shadow and light, pain and wisdom. The mature feminine doesn't fit in a 15-second story. It's not measured in likes, but in roots. And here's where a crucial point emerges. As long as the Puella is exalted as a symbol of the ideal feminine, many women will continue disconnected from themselves. But what happens when this perfect image starts to crack? What appears in the mirror after the makeup of lightness runs? The shadow of the eternal girl. Not everything that shines is light. The Puella Aeterna, with all her lightness and charm, also carries a side that's almost never shown, not even to herself. It's the shadow, the silent, invisible part that screams when the party's over, alone in the room, even surrounded by people, feeling like something's missing, even living a life full of movement. The eternal girl's shadow is emptiness, the feeling of always starting but never arriving, of having many stories but few roots, and worst of all, not being able to explain what she's feeling. This shadow isn't a punishment, it's a calling. It appears when the soul starts to realize that it's no longer possible to pretend everything's okay. When patterns repeat, when relationships end the same way, when projects don't move forward, it's life saying, there's something in there that needs to be seen. And what needs to be seen often is the pain of denial itself, the fear of growing, of making mistakes, of failing, the unconscious desire to be saved, while disguising itself as freedom. And here's where the internal conflict begins, wanting to be free but feeling trapped by oneself. It's at this point that many women feel they're on the verge of something, but don't know what. Discomfort becomes constant. Joy seems increasingly distant, and the shadow, which was previously avoided, starts knocking on the door with more force. But there's something curious about the shadow. It only appears with more intensity when we're close to something important. It's the prelude to change, the pain of expansion, and maybe the first sign that something is ready to be born, but first needs to die. The individuation process begins with crisis. There comes a time when neither the shine of beginnings, nor compliments, nor freedom seduce like before. It's when the woman realizes she's tired, but doesn't know of what. She feels repetitive, as if trapped in an emotional loop with no way out. This is the crisis, and it's not the end. On the contrary, it's the clearest sign that something inside her is trying to emerge. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And it's in this darkness that the true individuation process begins." It's at this point that the Puella needs to look at herself with more honesty than ever. It's no longer enough to blame others, the past, or destiny. Change begins with recognizing one's own patterns, and the question that hurts but transforms: what in me is keeping everything as is? This is where the inner mirror reveals itself, and with it, the pain of seeing one's own escapes, repetitions, illusions. But this pain is fertile. It's sacred. It can be the beginning of the crossing, and no crossing begins with comfort. It begins with truth. Crisis is the crack through which light enters. It's the moment when the woman realizes she can no longer live on autopilot. And at this moment, simple but powerful practices emerge, writing about her repetitive cycles, talking to a Jungian therapist, reading works like Women Who Run with the Wolves or Jung's Red Book. It's a path of investigation, a path that doesn't promise immediate lightness, but integrity. And the curious thing is that the more she dives into the crisis, the closer she gets to herself. But what happens when this truth finally comes to light? Becoming a woman, the psychological crossing. Truly becoming a woman is very different from what they say out there. It's not about abandoning lightness, nor becoming a serious and rigid version of herself. It's about integrating, about realizing it's possible to be sweet and firm, free and committed, spontaneous and responsible. The true psychological crossing begins when the Puella understands that growing is not a burden, it's a conscious choice, and that all that girlish energy doesn't need to be erased, just guided. Maturity is when magic continues to exist, but now with direction. This transition doesn't happen overnight. It requires courage. Courage to say no when she used to stay silent. Courage to stand by her decisions without expecting applause. Courage to stop looking for a savior and start trusting her own compass. Here the woman begins to leave the emotional role of daughter, the one who waits, who depends, who hesitates, and becomes the author of her own story. And being an author isn't just beautiful in discourse, it's a daily practice. It starts with small attitudes, like choosing where to live, what to tolerate, who to connect with. And the more she takes on this protagonism, the more she feels something new, a strength that was previously dormant. It's as if the soul said, "Finally, now I can breathe." And this doesn't mean abandoning dreams or lightness. It means giving them fertile soil to flourish. As Clarissa Pinkola Estes describes, the whole woman is the one who went through her internal forests and came out with marked skin but more alive eyes. But is there a point where this woman becomes something even deeper than whole? The whole feminine, myth and soul. When a woman integrates the girl she was with, the woman she chooses to be, something magnificent happens. She accesses a type of wisdom that can't be learned from books. It's ancestral, symbolic, visceral. It's the point where the feminine stops being performance and becomes presence. She no longer needs to prove herself or hide her pain. She dances between extremes with grace. She knows how to begin but also how to end. She knows how to be light but no longer fears darkness. Like Persephone, who descends to the underworld as a daughter and returns as a queen. This integration isn't mystical, it's practical. It appears in how the woman faces conflicts, how she embraces her emotions, how she stays silent when necessary and speaks when inevitable. She carries within herself myth and soul. She no longer gets lost trying to be what's expected. Now she chooses what she wants to be. And by doing this, she becomes a reference, not through idealization, but through coherence. The whole feminine isn't the perfect feminine, but the conscious feminine. It's the one who knows that maturity isn't the end of magic. It's the beginning of true inner alchemy. This woman has roots, but she also has wings. And the most curious thing is that by deepening into herself, she reconnects with all other women, as if she were part of an older, vaster river, where each one who awakens also awakens others. And at this point, the eternal girl archetype doesn't disappear. It transforms. It becomes an ally, a reminder of lightness that now walks alongside depth. But not every woman is ready for this, and many still resist the calling, until the calling becomes impossible to ignore. Awakening isn't easy, but it liberates. Awakening hurts. There's no way to romanticize this process. When the eternal girl starts to realize that the old charms no longer work, that others' gazes aren't enough, that emptiness persists, even on happy days, something inside her cracks. It's the beginning of a collapse, but also of a liberation. Because ceasing to be the favorite, the nice one, the one everyone loves, can seem scary. But it's exactly there that the woman who is enough for herself is born. The one who no longer needs to be accepted, because she finally accepts herself. This moment has no glamour. It's lonely, confusing, and often silent. The woman who once sought to be saved now looks in the mirror and understands. Either she learns to get up, or she'll remain trapped in the same cycle. And this can start with something simple, saying no for the first time, setting boundaries, choosing herself even if it displeases others. These small acts are revolutionary, not because of the noise they make, but because of the freedom they provide. This is where the girl dies, but not a tragic death, a symbolic death, because in her place, strength is born. And this strength is discreet. It doesn't need to prove anything. It manifests in conscious choices, in more authentic relationships, in a life with more purpose. The awakened woman knows she's not ready, but moves forward anyway. And by taking this step, she begins to walk a new path, where freedom isn't the absence of pain, but the presence of soul. And it's precisely on this path that something happens, a subtle calling, almost imperceptible, that comes from within, a silent invitation to go beyond the pain, beyond the mask, straight to the center of the soul, the invitation to the inner journey. This video isn't a criticism, nor a demand. It's a mirror, one of those we avoid facing for fear of what we'll see, but when looked at with courage, shows exactly what we need. The eternal girl doesn't need to be denied or fought. She just needs to be seen, recognized, because it's in this recognition that the possibility of change lives. It's not about becoming an adult overnight. It's about starting to listen to what your soul has been whispering for ages. You're ready for more. This journey isn't for those who want quick answers. It's for those who have the courage to ask themselves, who am I when no one is watching? Maybe you identify with everything that was said here, or maybe you just feel a pang in your chest, a discomfort you can't explain. That's already a sign. And you know why? Because consciousness begins like this, restless, uncomfortable, strange. And if you made it this far, it's because something inside you no longer wants to hide. Something is about to change. The crossing from girl to woman isn't a straight line. It's made of falls, new beginnings, silences, and deep discoveries. Jung said that what we don't face within ourselves manifests outside as destiny. So maybe, just maybe, what you're living through now isn't bad luck or punishment, but the calling. Life's push for you to begin your own journey back to yourself. And the best part? You're not alone, but you're the one who needs to take the first step. Now tell me, what did you see in yourself throughout this video? Can you recognize where the eternal girl still lives within you? Maybe in your impulsive choices, in escaping commitments, or in that emptiness that insists on appearing When everything seems fine, transformation begins when you stop hiding from yourself and start asking the right questions. What kind of woman do you want to be from now on? Maybe it's time to grab a notebook and write down everything you felt while watching. What patterns did you recognize? What don't you want to repeat anymore? It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be honest. And if you have the courage, leave in the comments. What part of the journey are you on? When you write, you listen to yourself. And when you share, you can inspire other people to free themselves too. Remember, awakening begins with an honest look. If this touched your heart in some way, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because this space is made for those who want to dive deep, heal, and be reborn. And if you want to continue this journey, click on the video that's appearing here on the screen. It will expand even more on what we started today. The world needs whole women, and the next one could be you.